Да, слышно, видно.
Да, отлично.
Прекрасно. Хорошо. Тогда давайте еще минутку подождем. Еще должна подсоединиться к нам Маша. Маша, вы с нами? Да, Маша, я вас вижу. Мгм. Хорошо, тогда давайте буквально через минутку начнем. Hello, friends, once again. Joel, are you with us?
So Dave, today night at NYU.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. As far as I understand, today we're dealing with one of your most beloved pericopes in the whole gospel, the exorcism, with a lot of topics, that you have raised in your commentary.
Okay. If you say so, yeah. You probably remember it better than I do. Yeah.
Okay. Let me. First show you our diglot.
All right.
И, может быть, давайте прочтем первый стих. Ирина, вы готовы прочесть первый стих по-гречески?
Да.
Okay.
Kai palen exelton ekton horion tiuru elten dia sidonos eisten talasan des Galilaias. Ana meson ton horion decapoleos.
Да. Здесь мы встречаемся с интересной географией. Some commentators think that the very strange way that Jesus goes from Tyre to the Sea of Galilee via Sidon and then the Decapolis betrays the fact that the author of the Gospel was unaware of the real geography of the southern Levant and mixed everything. There's just an error. But probably we can see this strange way as a sort of a symbolic designation for the fact that the whole Gentile regions to the north of the land of Israel proper was covered by this Jesus, one may say, missionary way, because Sidon lies to the north of Tyre, and then if one goes from Tyre to Sidon through the Decapolis, this means going first to the east, and then from east to the south and to the west, a sort of a circular movement which covers all the Gentile region to the north of Israel. You had, remember, some remarks about this, Joel.
Yeah, comparisons like, I don't know, going from, I don't know, Moscow to St. Petersburg, going through by way of Vladivostok or something like that. Yeah.
Yes, but the main question is not whether this is geographically best way
Yeah.
to go from Tyre to the Sea of Galilee, but what is the reason for this strange itinerary?
Yeah, I remember now I said that. Yeah, maybe that's right. I guess, you know, the real question is, or one question is, how good their geographical knowledge was in antiquity. You know, not having maps, the sort of maps that we do. You know, would Mark know the geography well enough and expect his readers to know it well enough that they would, you know, that they could understand that this was supposed to be symbolic of a tour of Gentile regions. So, but yeah, maybe what I said in my commentary is right, that it's deliberately signaling that these are all regions where non-Jews live.
Yes, though you do not comment on the, I would like to say, rather circular movement that is probably indicated by this. First north, then obviously east, or at least southeast, and then southwest.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the fact that this particular region is depicted here when Mark wants to show Jesus as journeying in the Gentile lands, do you think that this may be regarded as a kind of a hint at what particular areas were especially important for the readership of the Gospel of Mark? Whether we can understand, regard this as an indication of the area where or for which the Gospel of Mark was written, or
yeah, well, that's I think that's an interesting theory. You know, that maybe these are areas that, you know, especially I argued that Mark was maybe written in Syria, and so maybe these areas would be known to Mark and some of those in his community, which I think is mostly a Gentile community. I mean, certainly by the time you get to chapter 8, where we're going to have another feeding, I think it'll be significant that that's in a Gentile area. So the first feeding in chapter 5 was a feeding of Jews, and the second feeding is a feeding of Gentiles. So I think this is a section of the gospel that's, you know, that's dealing with the subject of non-Jews and their relationship to Jesus. Because we just had before this, the Syrophoenician woman who's a Gentile. So it seems to me like there's a Gentile theme in this section of the gospel.
Yes, but I must confess that before I started reading commentaries on the Gospel of Mark, had I been asked who were those people who brought the person who was deaf mute to Jesus,
Mhm.
I would rather say, of course, the Jews. So the Gentile background of the story is we derive it just from the geographical description of Jesus' journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right, that it's not what happens. It's not a particularly Gentile or Jewish thing that happens in the story itself. It's just, the setting is what makes it a story maybe about a Gentile.
Okay.
But I do think, like your suggestion that, maybe some of the locations that stories show reflects the origin of the stories is that's an interesting and worth thinking about suggestion. Like, for example, the story in chapter 5 about the exorcism of the Gerasene demoniac, does that story come from that area? And was it a story about how we got our church here? What's the kernel of the church in this area? Well, it goes back to the time of Jesus himself, and he healed somebody here. So I think it's possible to see some of these stories as origin stories of churches in a particular area, that existed before Mark came along and collected them.
Yes, and once again, in this story about the Gerasene demoniac, we also have some problems with the geography. So maybe in both cases, the geography is erroneous, not because the author didn't know the real geography of the southern Levant, but in order to reflect some of his, so to speak, geographical concerns.
Yeah, it could be that it's a theological geography or a geography.
Theological geography, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's, it's something worth thinking about.
Yeah. Is it also important in this respect that this story is not repeated in Matthew and Luke?
Yeah, well, it is interesting, the things that Matthew and Luke don't repeat. I mean, it's kind of a strange story as we go on, and especially like the healing technique has elements that are kind of magical. So I guess I have thought that was the reason that they didn't repeat it. Another healing story in chapter 8 is the story of which this is sort of a doublet of, is the story of the healing of the blind man in 2 stages, where there's also some kind of magical techniques that Jesus uses, and where he has some difficulty in performing the healing. So I think in both cases, maybe Matthew and Luke leave these stories out because they're kind of weird and sort of magical and difficult to reconcile with just the view that Jesus can heal anything just by his word. In both cases, there's kind of a struggle that's going on.
Okay. One more question that also comes to my mind. when we speak about who were they who brought the deaf-mute person to Jesus, who were they in the original tradition, before the tradition came to Mark? Because it seems that we have already spoken about this, that the passages which describe Jesus' journeys from one place to another seem to be editorial insertions by Mark. So even if here in this Markan context, the story seems to be to have place in the Gentile area, was it the same way with its original pre-Markan setting?
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation and a good question. And as I said before, it doesn't seem to me that there's anything in the story itself that says this is Jewish or this is non-Jewish. You know, so it's a generic healing story, you know, with some rather strange features. And as you say, it's the frame which has probably been supplied by the gospel author himself that, you know, makes it part of this theological geography. So that's Mark's concern, but the story itself probably pre-existed. Are you going to show us something on the screen, because we're not seeing anything?
Oh, sorry?
We're not seeing anything on the screen right now, except each other's lovely faces. Yeah. All right, there we go.
Nice.
Okay.
Yes. I suggest that, может быть, Ирина, вы прочли бы следующие 4 стиха, 32-35, потому что это такая связанная история, а потом мы бы уже поговорили немножко про русский перевод и дальше про то, какие тут комментарии можно к этой замечательной сцене сделать. Ира, вы с нами?
Да.
Да. Тогда стихи 32-35 ваши.
Кай ферусин ауто кофон, кай могилалон, кай паракалусин аутон гина эпите ауто тенхейра. Кай аполабоменос аутон апоту охлу, катедиен эбален тус дактюлус ауту, эйста ота ауту. Kai ptiusas hepsatotes glosses autu. Kai anablepsas eiston uranon estenaxen kai legei auto. Effata. Hoestin dianoi ti. Kai euteos enoigesan autu kai aquai. Kai elute hodesmos ten glosses autu, kai elalei ortos. Это шестой тоже может быть, да? А 36-й прочесть?
Алло, простите, меня слышно сейчас?
Да.
Да.
А 36 стих читать или только до 35?
Нет, давайте до 35, потому что там уже начинается следующая тематика, следующая тема тоже у нас рекуррентно повторяющаяся. К нему приводит человека глухого и немого и умоляет, чтобы он возложил на него руку. Иисус отвел его в сторону от толпы. Опять вот постоянно встречающийся мотив того, что Иисус кого-то отводит в сторону от толпы, то учеников, то в данном случае глухонемого.
если верить географическому описанию язычника. Когда они остались наедине, опять та же самая тема, то, что какие-то важные вещи происходят именно наедине, да? Тайна Messianic Secret. Он сунул пальцы ему в уши. Здесь, видите, очень интересное по-гречески выражение «эбелен», да? Мы уже многократно встречались с тем, что тогда, когда у нас говорится про изгнание бесов, то у нас глагол «балло» употребляется. И чуть выше мы видели тогда, когда у нас бес вышел из молодой девушки, она была брошена «веблеменон» эпитен «клинен». Вот, и помните, в самом начале у нас, когда речь идет о том, что как развивается действие после крещения Иисуса, говорится, что «экбаллей» тон Иисун, дух буквально выбрасывает Иисуса, да? Такое ощущение, что вот этот глагол очень часто он здесь встречается, как правило, с префиксом «экбалло», когда речь идет про изгнание демонов, но что вообще это какой-то такой очень важный для Марка глагол, важно, что подчеркивает некий такой вот насильственную сторону сообщения между миром, который несет с собой Иисус, и миром демонов, да? И здесь у нас же тоже схватка происходит, хотя эксплицитно не говорится, что какого-то демона Иисус отсюда изгоняет из глухого и немого, но явно, что это одна из сцен вот той же самой линии борьбы, противостояния Иисуса и демонов. Отсюда глагол «эбелем». Вот, но, конечно, по-русски сказать «он кинул пальцы ему в уши» невозможно. Тем не менее, я пробовал передать это каким-то таким наиболее из подходящих сюда глаголов, наиболее жестким. Он сунул пальцы ему в руки. В синодальном, кажется, он вложил пальцы ему в руки. Но, конечно, здесь это совершенно было бы неадекватно для перевода греческого «эбелем». Окей, да. Сунул пальцы ему в уши и, плюнув, коснулся его языка, поднял глаза к небу, простонал и сказал ему «эффафа», что значит «откройся». И тотчас отверзлись уши его, и развязаны стали узы его языка. Опять же, очень интересно здесь глагол «элюта», да? У нас в магических заклинаниях, это время, в магических текстах, очень часто, тогда, когда речь идет вот об освобождении кого-то от демона, употребляется как раз глаголы с семантикой развязывание, отвязывание. Про это недавно как раз был доклад Алексея Кимовича Лявданского, вот ровно именно про употребление глагола развязывания, глаголов развязывания в магических заклинаниях, направленных на борьбу с демонами. И он стал говорить ясно. One. Before we move to the description of what is going on, and of course, this pericope is full of words, full of lexica, which is somehow connected to the magic, to the exorcism, and so on and so on. I would like to look a bit at this Fafa, which is especially interesting for me as a semitologist, because some people connect it with the Hebrew nif'al, patach. Some people connect it with, not with Hebrew, but with Aramaic, itpa'al. And I would like just to share with all of us two passages that I found in the Talmud, in the Targum, following your commentary, child, where we have a clear indication that the assimilation of the consonants in the Aramaic hitpa'al, even in this very verb, was quite common. Quite common. Wait a second. Yes, that's two passages from the Palestinian Targum, different versions of Palestinian Targum, Targum Neofiti, and the fragmentary Targum. Of course, as it is almost everywhere the case with Palestinian Targums, they are much expanded with regard to the Masoretic text. Перед нами два Таргума, оба относящихся к традиции палестинских Таргумов. Таргум Неофити и так называемый фрагментарный Таргум. И среди это Бытие 49.1, вот, и к еврейскому тексту Бытие 49.1, переведенному на арамейский, сюда добавлено очень много всего прочего материала, который часто бывает в Таргумах. В частности, добавлена такая фраза. Именно нас сейчас интересует. Как только тайна была открыта ему, она была скрыта от него. Как только дверь была открыта ему, она была закрыта перед ним. Да. Видите? Мандай патах лех тар-а. Значит, когда были открыты ему дверь, ворота. Да. И теред минех. Эта дверь и ворота были закрыты от него. Вот видите здесь. Это патах. Такая как бы правильная грамматическая сирийская форма. А в параллельном Таргуме, вот в фрагментарном Таргуме из Ватиканской библиотеки, совершенно та же самая вставка, только она описывается как ипатах или эпатах. То есть уже с уподоблением ассимиляции, которая произошла. Вообще ассимиляция в арамейских возвратных породах — это вещь частая, но здесь просто красиво, что это происходит ровно с тем самым глаголом, который здесь встречается у нас в Марке. I would like to thank you, Joel, because the mentioning that we have epatach in the fragmentary Targum of the Vatican Library, I took it from your commentary. It was very interesting for me.
I see. It's an interesting passage, isn't it? Because in the Bible itself, it just says that a mystery was revealed to Daniel. But here, the Targum expands that and wants to emphasize for some reason that it was just revealed for a moment to him, and then the revelation was cut off. So, I mean, I think it's interesting just in itself. Yes,
it's interesting because of its importance for our knowledge of the paradigm of the verb patach in Aramaic. But it also, though it came to my attention because of this morphological features, I suddenly saw that it's so close to some topics of the gospel we are reading.
The mystery that is
Yeah.
both revealed and hidden.
Hmm.
And then the same thing said through the language of metaphor. This is the same combination of revelation and being hidden that permit the Gospel of Mark. And take into account that the early Targums, of course, they were a bit later than the Gospel of Mark, but they probably may have inherited some features of the Jewish mentality, Jewish mystical mentality, which independently was somehow reflected in the Gospel of Mark.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I do think that Daniel, is a book that has influenced Mark a lot.
That's Genesis. That's
Oh,
Genesis.
this is Genesis. Oh, right. Yeah. All right.
That's just Genesis 49.
All right. Well, Genesis has also influenced him. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. Genesis influenced all of us.
Yeah. Well, but
Yes.
what's happening is Genesis 49 like the Jacob's prophecy?
Yes,
What's
yes,
going to happen
yes.
to his sons? Yeah.
It's the beginning of Jacob's prophecy, and the first two lines of the Targums correspond more or less to the Hebrew text, and then we have a lengthy additions which somehow reveal to us how was revelation perceived in the time of the Targum, and it was perceived, as you see, as a combination of something revealed and something hidden. The same thing we have here in Mark.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Oh, that's interesting. That would be an interesting idea to try to develop, into an article or something. That's
okay. We have a lot of ideas. Imagine in our seminars that are worth developing into separate articles.
Yes. Let's pass them down to the students.
Yes, we have a lot of students at our seminar today. Okay, I close the Targums.
It's a very interesting passage, really.
As I close the Targums, and we return to the text of Mark. Return to the text of Mark.
I mean, I do think it's interesting. Mark has more Aramaic than any of the other Gospels. And, presumably he's gotten it from his traditions, but still he preserves more Aramaic than, Matthew and Luke when they don't repeat this story. But even with some of the stories that they do repeat, sometimes they eliminate the Aramaic. So I
yes, it's also important that in Mark, these Aramaic sayings, we encounter them exactly at some most important places. For example, when Jesus brings back to life a dead girl.
Yes, and in both cases, it's in a healing context. And I mean, it may be that the Aramaic is retained partly because, for at least some of the readers, it would have been exotic. And, you want to get back to the original words, which were words of healing, magical words. So, in both of those cases, in the healing of the dead girl, and here, the retention of the Aramaic, may be significant, not only for what it says about the author and his linguistic world, but also for just the overall impression of, this is a numinous act.
Yes, and of course, as concerns the cry of dereliction. Also,
That's right.
this is the culmination passage, and it also contains an Aramaic loan word.
Well, yeah, I think that's important, you know, it's an important comparison because, of course, you know, there is sort of this contrast between the first half of the gospel where Jesus is acting in this powerful way and the ending of the gospel where he seems to be powerless and he dies, you know, with a cry of despair on his lips. But I think in Mark's, you know, sort of that sort of inversion is significant for Mark, you know, that somehow it's in Jesus' powerlessness that the power of the gospel is manifested.
Yes. And when I read your commentary, I saw a lot of parallels that you made there before, between what Jesus does and what we can read about the magic practice or exorcism practice in the time of Jesus. I mentioned already the usage of such words as ballo. Ballo. Do you see my mouse on the screen? Yes.
No, we don't see your face.
But do you see? Do you see the mouse?
We say your we see your
Yes.
mouse. I thought you said mouth. I can't
No.
see your mouth because I can't see your face. Yeah.
Okay.
But I can see your mouse. Yeah.
Yes, and luo, which is also very important.
Yes.
Then of course, the very idea that healing may be somehow helped by spittle.
Yeah,
Spittle
I had a lot of fun researching spittle for my commentary. And
yes.
And at that time I was in Glasgow and Dale Ellison was visiting, and I said, I'm researching spittle, and he said, oh, I have, 10 pages of notes about spittle. So, but yeah, I mean, it's fun to think about. I mean, for one thing, he doesn't tell you where Jesus spits. Does he spit on the ground? Does he spit on his hands and then touch the man's tongue with his hand? Or a possibility, which is suggested by a parallel in the Talmud somewhere, maybe he spits in the man's mouth. But in any case, there's something magical about spittle. And this is one of the parallels with the healing of the blind man in chapter 8. There also he spits. And, spittle is like spirit. It's something that comes from inside of you. So it partakes of your essence, but, it can also travel outside of you and, communicate itself to other people. But this seems like real magical stuff. And as you say, I think it's right that there is a demonic undertone to this narrative, especially because of Ballo and Eleuthe.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Eleuthe ho desmos, that the bond of his tongue was loosed.
Yes, exactly. And then also, as far as I remember, the usage of the verb stenazo can also be regarded as a kind of reminiscence of exorcistic practices of that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a release of breath. Yeah. So it probably does invoke this whole world of, the spirit and spirits and things coming from inside of you that can have a good effect on the outside. So, in the last passage we learned, I haven't thought of this before. In the last passage we learned that it's not what comes from outside that defiles, but what comes from inside. But here we learn that what comes from inside of Jesus can sanctify and can heal.
That's an interesting idea. So I think that the juxtaposition of these two narratives, of these two passages, may
Maybe.
have some inner play with the topic of something coming from inside.
Yeah, I don't think I ever thought of that before, but this is also an idea that one of your students should develop.
Okay.
Maybe.
We have many students with us, and probably some of them might be interested in looking in more details at some peculiar features of the Marka narratives. Of course, if some of my students had asked me what text from the New Testament is most interesting from the point of view of research, I would answer that probably the Gospel of Mark.
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, I think it should be said, like, not everybody believed in demons in the ancient world. I mean, it seems to me like this is real folk kind of belief. And, there were different, if you read medical texts, they had a completely different approach. They didn't believe that, sickness comes from things invading you from the outside. But, there's much more, elite interpretation would talk about the different humors inside the body and bringing them into balance. But this is a different kind of conceptuality where the body is open to invasion from outside forces, and healing means expelling those forces. So it does seem to me that it comes from a different sort of world than the elite world of the doctors.
Yes. One more very interesting thing that I found in your commentary. I would even like to put a page from a commentary on our screen.
Георгиевич, а вас не видно по-прежнему.
Меня не видно. А теперь? Теперь меня видно?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we see your mouth.
Good.
Face to face.
Face to face,
Like
yes.
Moses and God, yeah.
Yes, but do you see your own commentary?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting thing, which of course comes from the much later time. But this today, while reading your commentary, this was the first time when I heard about this, that churches
in Milan and Rome from early times performed in their baptismal liturgies a ceremony known as a Persia opening, in which the bishop applied his spittle to the candidate's nose and ears and said a feta. Of course, this is a very late tradition, but it's interesting that we do not know when it originated, but it somehow connects this this healing a person from being deaf and mute
Mhm.
to baptism, to
Mhm.
entering the Christian community. And even though the rite itself seems to be quite late, the idea of linking this passage to baptisms, to entering Christian community, may go to some quite early tradition.
Yeah, I do think that's interesting, and that baptism, I mean, there's lots of evidence that baptism had kind of an exorcistic dimension to it, and that was known in the church, and you see, similar imagery sometimes even in Paul's letters. There are passages which scholars think come from baptisms, which talk about moving from darkness to light and, escaping from the shackles of the devil. So I think probably these ideas continued in baptism for centuries and even into modern times.
Yes. Okay, I put back our diaglot, back to screen.
I mean, I think, just to mention, for students and scholars, I do think that one could write an interesting monograph, not just an article, about the exorcistic dimension of baptism, from starting with New Testament and going on into the early centuries.
Okay. I need to conduct the rest of our discussion from the street, but Maria would be here as someone who would lead our seminar for the rest of our today's meeting. Маша, вы с нами?
Да, я здесь.
Окей. Тогда я...
Текст.
Что-что?
Я могу заменить свой экран на свой экран, если нужно.
Как вам удобно? Как вам удобнее?
А вы хотите оставить свой?
Может быть, лучше было бы, чтобы вы вывели свой экран.
Хорошо. Yeah, okay. We can continue. Да, вот такая еще интересная вещь, которую мы не обсудили еще, и то, что я увидела в комментарии у Аделы Коллинз, это разночтение в 33 стихе в рукописях, относительно того, как именно, какое именно действие совершал Иисус. Я сейчас покажу. Joel, as far as I remember, you do not discuss in your commentary differences, different readings in the manuscripts for verse 33. I found it in the commentary of Adela that there are many variants in respect where Jesus spilled and spitted, and so how it was, how everything was done here. So I offer to look.
Yeah. It's okay. We can talk about something that Adela has that I don't have.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah.
So this is manuscript 0131.
Mhm.
And it has Epteson Aestus Dactylus autu. So he spit on his fingers and then put them into the ears of deaf men. And
so that is, I said before, like probably the original text, it's not clear where he spits. So this explains where he spat. That's good.
Because in and another variant is Ebalentus Dactylus autu kai Psuses Eista Orta autu.
All right.
Epsata as glosses autu. So
So that's another theory about where he spat. Yeah.
Another variant. But it's nice that that manuscript variants correspond to your ideas how it was done. So it's you think alike with
the scribes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to discuss is is this elutero desmostes glosses autu. You mentioned that Mogellalon is hapax in New Testament, and it occurs on the ones in Isaiah. So it could be an allusion to Isaiah 35:6, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and don't we possibly have an allusion to Isaiah at the end of the passage? What this he has done all things well. In verse 37, I think people see an allusion to a different or maybe it's from the same chapter, actually, chapter 35.
5:6. I just wanted to mention that I think it's well-known thing, but somehow it's not mentioned in the commentaries I read for today, that this phrase in Mark, desmostes glosses autu, is sometimes considered as an allusion to probable double meaning or homonymous root for this ilem, Hebrew ilem, because there is root, Hebrew root, Aleph Lamed Mem, which means to bind, but it's used only once in Genesis 37:7 about binding sheep. Yeah, but it could be known, and so there is an idea that the basic meaning of this root Aleph Lamed Mem is to tie or to bind, and that this Nifal Ne'elam, to be dump, is actually to be tied in mouth. Yeah, to be with tied mouth.
That's interesting. I didn't know that there was an etymological connection.
It's not sure. I'm not sure that it is an etymological connection. It looks like this verb, ilem, to bind sheaves, which you see here. It could be denominative verb from sheaf. Yeah, and it occurs only once, but yeah, probably were known to native speakers, and so they associated them somehow. Yeah, and both roots occur in Aramaic as well. So if we think, if we think that the background was Aramaic, so it also works.
Yeah, that's interesting. Or in English, it's not politically correct.
Sorry?
We don't say dumb anymore. We say mute instead, because just a word to the wise. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it's some sort of playing on this magical vocabulary and some sort of allusions on this Hebrew background. I also wanted to share some. Maybe I said it in Russian. Вот в комментарии Аделы еще приводится много разных интересных параллелей из античной литературы о том, каким образом использовалась слюна в качестве медицинского средства, и, да, соответственно, в каких случаях она применялась. Вот она приводит разные отсылки на, например, естественную историю Плиния, где он сообщает о том, что вот слюна использовалась, считалось, что она как-то отвращает колдовство и используется в качестве лечения против эпилепсии и разных других вещей. Вот, пожалуй, наиболее интересный, наверное, такой любопытный пассаж, который она приводит, это пассаж такой параллельный, это пассаж из Светония, из жизнеописания Веспасиана. Вот здесь да, ну, давайте я даже вытащила его специально по-русски, там есть, и вот, сейчас я покажу этот кусочек. Вот, мне кажется, что любопытная очень параллель. новому и неожиданному императору еще не доставало, так сказать, величия и как бы веса, но это вскоре пришло. Два человека из простонародья, один слепой, другой хромой, одновременно подошли к нему, когда он правил суд, и умоляли излечить их от немощи, как указал им во сне Серапис. Глаза прозреют, если он на них плюнет. Нога исцелится, если он достоится коснуться ее пяткой. Немало не надеясь на успех, он не хотел даже и пробовать. Наконец, уступив уговорам друзей, он на глазах у огромной толпы попытал счастье, и успех был полным. Да. I mentioned this numerous parallels from Greek and Latin sources about using speed as a healing mean. What do you think about these parallels? Why they're important for our text?
I guess it just shows that, throughout the ancient Near East and the Roman world, that spittle was thought to have magical properties. So, very common and also found in Jewish texts. So.
As I remember, there is no spit in Hebrew Bible. Am I right?
Yeah, I can't remember any spit in the Hebrew Bible. But I think there are passages in rabbinic literature. But I can't call them to mind right at the moment. But there's a lot of magic in the Talmud, and
yeah,
it's really interesting.
Yeah, for me, this parallel from Suetonius was very, very sound, and it has very, very clear parallels with these people who go after somebody who they consider as having power, and it's nice that here it is an emperor, and he somehow is compared to, it can be compared here to Jesus.
No, that's very nice.
Yeah, okay. 1 second. Yeah, we can go back.
What was what did you give in the Russian there? Was that the same passage from Suetonius, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the same passage from Suetonius. I just read it in Russian. Yeah, and another question I wanted to ask and to discuss is how do you think are this particular story of healing and maybe some others, do they have any connection with Old Testament Old Testament stories about about initiation or of prophets? I see, I just in this story I see very clear allusions to, first of all, to Isaiah 6 and
Okay.
to,
Yeah.
to Seraphim who touches
Yeah,
mouth
touches the lips, of the prophet,
of the prophet, and I think there are very clear parallels with this text, and I can just maybe show it. It's yeah, so it's verse 7, kai hepsato to stomatosmu, kai epon idu hepsato to ton heleon su, and apheleta anomia su, and so on. And then it's again about those who can listen, who has ears and can listen, and those who do not have. Those who have eyes and can see, and before that, the prophet is calls himself as one who has unclean lips. Like akatotahele echon. And other parallels are in other there are other parallel stories, and they also have some connection with this text. First of all, Exodus 4, story about
Moses has a speech
Moses,
impediment.
and he also he calls himself as one with who had difficulties with kaved pe, and kaved shon. There are different Greek words, but the meaning is the same.
Logos,
And then there is again a revelation from God about this poiesen duskofon kai kofon blepon kai tuflon. So it's again the same idea about God's power behind that, and
healing blindness and deafness.
And it's interesting that in the next passage, Septuagint has closer text to Mark than Hebrew, because God says, "Ego anoixo to stomasu," I will open your mouth, but Hebrew text has, "I will be with your mouth." So it's a bit different.
That is interesting. That's significant.
The third passage relevant is from Daniel. So it's a revelation of Daniel in chapter 10, and it's again hos homoiosis heros anthropo hepsato to mu ton heleon kai enoixa to stoma to mu kai lalasa. So he touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and started to speak. For me, it's interesting. Not just it's maybe these passages can just have common a magic background. So in these stories about prophets, yeah, maybe some magic ritual can be in mind as well.
Well, yeah,
But it's also interesting that after these stories about healing in the gospel, those who were healed or those who saw it, they also become to to speak and to prophesy about Jesus.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say, that, you know, at the end of this passage, Jesus tells him not to say anything, but he goes out and he tell, you know, the more he commands them not to speak, the more they speak. And so, but one, you know, even though he's disobeying what Jesus told him to do, one can't imagine that that's a bad thing, actually, because he's spreading the word about Jesus. And it's similar to what happens at the end of the Gerasene demoniac story. He tells him just to go back to your family, but instead he becomes like a missionary, you know, for his whole area. So I think, you know, the connection with these prophetic stories that you point out, there may really be something there. So I think that's a good insight, which I don't think I saw before.
I don't know if it's
Please do.
interesting to look at the book of Sirach. There's one verse about spitting. If it's good now to do in the chapter 28, 12, I think.
Yeah.
Although in Russian it is 14.
Could you please repeat Sirach?
28, 12. Chapter 28, verse 12. If thou blow the spark, it shall burn. If thou spit upon it, it shall be quenched. And both these come out of thy mouth.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's more interesting to it's close to what you were telling about that everything what goes from inside is good, is clean.
Yes, it helps. So this spitting helps stop the fire.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just a wisdom saying, you know, like,
Yes.
it's funny that, you know, pretty much the same action can have opposite effects. So it's sort of like some observations that you get in Proverbs and so on. But it does definitely associate spitting with what comes out of the inside. So I think that's significant.
And it's somehow it helps to heal, maybe. Stop something bad, no, stop the fire.
Yeah.
In some sense, it's like healing. You know?
Stopping the fire is like healing. Yeah. Or
Mm,
starting the fire. I don't know.
yes.
But in the one case, if you blow on the fire, it gets bigger. But then if you go a little bit farther, you put it out. No.
it has a positive meaning. Well, spitting has positive meaning here, and in
Yeah.
Mark also as well.
Oh, somebody should do a monograph on spitting in the biblical tradition. Good,
Yeah.
good dissertation topic. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we can go further. Yeah, it's interesting that what was opened after this saying is Hai Ako Ai. How do I understand it? Is it just ears, or it's listening, or what does it mean?
I guess I thought it was his ears, but yeah, but maybe because of the plural, right? But yeah, certainly maybe both the ears and what the ears do is implied.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's implied that listening is needed in order to speak. So ears were opened but he started not to listen but to speak after that. And
well, yeah, I mean this person, he's both, isn't he described as both deaf and mute? You know,
Yeah.
he can't hear and he can't speak. So
Yeah.
at the end of the story, both of those conditions, both of those impediments are released.
Yeah, and then I was thinking about this elale ortos. Is this ortos ambivalent? So it's like he speaks clearly, but also he speaks right things about
Implication, yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's good. And
Yeah.
he speaks rightly, and to speak rightly is to speak about Jesus, which is what he goes on to do.
Yeah, just because it looks like there are quite a lot of such ambiguous words which are which work in two directions, in this literal meaning, with this literal meaning, and also with this I don't know, it's not like a eschatological dimension, but more like dimension of a reader who already knows everything.
Yeah.
That's
good. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the last verse of this pericope, of course, probably the most interesting phrase is this kalos panta pepoiken. And there is clear allusion to Genesis, as you probably already mentioned it, but I think we can look at it. So it's.
I'll be right back.
Maria, we haven't
Turn
read
off my-
the last two verses.
Что?
Не прочли, да, правда, не прочли два последних.
Почитаем.
Я да.
Знаете греческий?
Kai diesteilato autois hina meteni legosin. Hoson de autois diestellato autoi malon perisoteron hekeruson. Kai hyper perisos exeples sonto legontes. Kalos panta pepoieken. Kai tus kofus poiei aquein. Kai tus alalus lalein.
Да, спасибо.
Конечно. И еще я хотела, если можно добавить, add something to the verse 35, that in the Russian translation we have only this first meaning of speaking right. Well, only
Literal meaning.
yes, the first meaning, not
Ну да.
the second as well.
Я не понимала.
In the translation of Mikhail Georgievich, there's only the first meaning of speaking clearly, only clearly. Yasna is
Okay.
clearly, and not speaking of Jesus, or speaking of the God,
Right, okay.
speaking right things. So,
Да, но мне кажется, что это такие амбивалентные вещи, их очень сложно в переводы вносить, к сожалению. Да, мы уже много раз с этим сталкивались, что, к сожалению, приходится выбирать один вариант, а в другой отправлять в примечание. Да, это недостаток перевода.
Но начал говорить правильно, например, было бы как раз амбивалентно.
Кстати говоря, интересная мысль, да. Если он стал говорить правильно, да, как правильные вещи. Давайте добавим. А как интересно делают английские переводы в этом месте. 7:33. Yeah, we discuss whether we can save these two meanings of orthos in translation, and I decided to check how English translations deal with it. Yeah, but it looks like they all I have here, they just translate plain, so just clearly, but maybe Luther recht implies
Yeah, правильно, yeah.
this ambiguity, yeah, and Larissa said that maybe we can use here instead of ясно use правильно.
Yeah.
Because it has it's the same as recht in German, and so it can be ambivalent as well.
but are we really sure that there are two meanings? Maybe if only this first one is important. We're not sure if there are really two meanings.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I wonder, does Mark use orthos? Otherwise, I can't remember other passages. I'm looking it up in my concordance. I don't think the word occurs elsewhere in Mark.
Yeah, no more orthos.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a problem, you know, when a word in the source language has two different meanings, both of which maybe the author was trying to get across. And then in the target language, you know, there isn't that same ambiguity. But I definitely think, you know, there's an allusion to Genesis, the first few chapters of Genesis here, and that would have been a known passage, and you know, even people who didn't know the Bible very well would know that God had made everything, and he found it good. It was very good.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you were talking before about Isaiah chapter 6, you know, that also was a very famous passage, and it later entered into the liturgy. And so, you know, with well-known passages like this, it becomes more probable that, you know, the author and maybe at least some of his readers would recognize the echo of the Bible.
So you think this my idea that there are allusions on Isaiah or on Exodus, it is probable, and
At least possible, and I guess, I always wonder, okay, maybe the author, he knows about this illusion, and maybe some of his hearers would get it, and maybe some of them wouldn't. But, trying to figure out how much they would have known is, becomes speculative.
Yeah, but it's true that since there are so many allusions on both on Isaiah 6 and on Exodus 3:4, and I think these chapters should be very well known to the readers. It's just impossible that they were not acquainted with them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And moreover, since these sayings from Isaiah about from Isaiah 6, 9, 10, they are repeated in different ways so many times in this gospel. It's just impossible that they knew only this saying and not the context. But yeah, who knows? Maybe it was saying that circulated somehow in testimonies, and yeah.
Well, and I think, and I'm going to have to go after I say this, but I think, the Genesis stuff is significant, for the overall theology of the gospel, because if hearers recognized that the creation story was being echoed, then this healing, it's not just this one man was healed, but there's something new happening, and that it fits into an overall eschatological framework where what's happening with Jesus is a recreation. It's a beginning of a new world, just like the beginning of the old world. So I do think that fits into the overall kind of apocalyptic background of the gospel.
So it's like a creation of a new man.
Yeah, Urtzeit und Endzeit, that the end is like the beginning. And we see that in various ways, partly through the echoes of the Moses story, but also even going even further back, that the new world that Jesus brings into being is it's as radically different, and it's as radical a conquest of chaos as happened in the beginning of everything. So I'll leave you with that to think about for the next week, and I have to go. Yeah.
Thank you very much, John.
So will you meet next week too?
Yeah, that's a question, because since we have Christmas 2 weeks later than you, so
I mean, it's fine for me.
yeah, so if it's fine for you, yeah, we it's
Okay.
still working time for us, so
Okay, good.
yeah,
Okay.
to meet next time, and
Okay.
then probably we'll have 2 weeks of holidays.
Okay, good. Okay, see you next week.
Thank you.
До свидания, bye.
Да, но мы можем прочитать эту цитату, и, на которую аллюзия, и на этом, наверное, закончить. Да, но это, наверное, хорошо известный, знакомый всем пассаж. Да, я могу по-гречески прочитать. «Кай эйден готеос та панта госа эпоесен, кай иду кала лиан, кай да, но дальше уже не обязательно, да. Увидел Бог все, что он сделал, и вот это очень хорошо, даже слишком хорошо. Вот, и да, это, конечно, действительно очень кажется, что тоже такая очень явная параллель с вот этим «колос панта пепоикен», да, то есть они говорят, используя вот эту вот аллюзию на книгу «Бытия». Да, соответственно, как говорит Джоэль, перенося это все в такой эсхатологический контекст нового творения. Ну что ж, спасибо. И есть ли какие-то вопросы, соображения? Какой-то был вопрос в чате. Вот Ира написала, что стал говорить хорошо. Да, может быть, действительно хорошо. Давайте тоже запишем и пошлем Михаилу Георгиевичу. Это интересный вариант. Спасибо. Мгм. Ну, хорошо. Если нет никаких соображений, то можно на этом заканчивать. Спасибо.
Спасибо.
Всего
До свидания.
Спасибо, до свидания.
Пойдем обдумывать услышанное. Спасибо.
До свидания.